Hey guys, Scripted here with another video, and Leslye Headland has come out of hiding to talk about why the Acolyte was cancelled. This should be interesting. We'll see what she says. I have a sneaking suspicion there's going to be some ists and some phobes and stuff in here. After staying out of the spotlight for the year since the cancellation of the Acolyte, series creator Leslye Headland finally divulges more about the divisive Star Wars series in a new interview with The Wrap. She says it was a new part of the timeline. It was all new characters. It was a part of the lore where you couldn't use a stormtrooper. You didn't have the reference of the politics and war that Tony Gilroy has brilliantly exploited in such a genius way in Andor. But all that iconography and all those visual references are original trilogy references, and our references were the High Republic novels and the publishing initiative, and then the prequels specifically with lightsabers. I'm not really sure what she means at the end there, specifically with lightsabers. She's essentially, in my opinion, kind of redirecting the crappiness of the Acolyte to the fact that she was doing it in this really difficult part of the timeline. Whereas Gilroy was able to exploit, he could have stormtroopers and he had all that OT iconography and the war that was going on in Paul. He could exploit that, but I didn't have that. That's what it sounds like to me. I didn't have that. I was stuck in this High Republic era, and that's why it's a risk. Well, that's sort of what you chose to do. I mean, the High Republic kind of, from what I saw, I have no idea about any of those stories whatsoever. The only things I constantly would see on social media would be posts about how there's LGBTQ people in it. That's you got a lot of that. You got some other stuff too, but you got a lot of that. So I think it's kind of interesting that they chose Leslye Headland to do this show. It really feels like the whole High Republic thing was trying to get that audience, which I don't know how you can do that, or I don't know why you would prioritize that when it's a very small group of people, many of whom already liked Star Wars and didn't need to be placated to. Many of them. There's a very, very tiny group of people that wouldn't get into it until you had them in it, kind of thing. You're telling me that a T didn't like Star Wars in the 80s? The few of them that were out there, you don't think they do you think they were sitting oh, there's not a T in this? And so it does feel like that was the whole thing. And then of course within the show, you've got the moms thing and all this other stuff. So it really felt like that whole thing, the High Republic, which I think is done now. I think. Let me know in the comment section if you know. I think it's done. And her show, the whole thing seemed to be just appealing to that group of people by inserting their lifestyles and all that stuff into a Star Wars show. So, I mean, she's complimenting Gilroy, but at the same time, it's kind of veiled in, but he had an easier place in the timeline to work with. That's what I take from that. But again, I don't think it's so much timeline as it is agenda-driven and message-driven. Of course, we can get into this later, but all the lore breaking and everything that went around with that she didn't have to do. She chose to do that. I also think that any gripes creatively with the show are completely valid. Okay. But that includes people not liking the witches and the moms and stuff. Right? I mean, I reviewed it. I didn't really get into that too much because, there's so much other stuff that's so bad. That's, it's not even that high on the list of silliness. But, okay, as long as, they're completely valid, that's people's reaction. It's usually their reaction to their own reaction. It's usually their reaction to their own reaction. Well, it's their reaction, so it is their, what? But like I said, the show was always a risk. It's the old adage of the first one through the wall is the bloodiest. No, that's not fair. You can't say that just because it's your first one, it was going to be met with problems. That's not fair. she's making excuses. She just needs to say, I made a crappy show. Like, she knows deep down that's the case. Because lots of people on their first attempt at anything, creatively in Hollywood or whatever, actually do a good job. So you can't use that as an excuse. The first one through the wall is the bloodiest. If that's a line from, like, Moneyball, I think. I can't remember the exact context of it. But it's like, no. Just because it was your first Star Wars project didn't mean it had to suck. And didn't mean you had to break lore. And didn't mean it had to be stupid. That's not the case. Okay, then they're asking her about the complaints on the media, stuff like that. I was not online, Headland said. However, I'm a Star Wars fan, which means I have always been, since the launch of YouTube, part of the Star Wars recap, criticism, lionization, fandom community. I did not know that. Does she have a YouTube channel or something? I have no idea. Maybe she comments? Anyone? Let me know. These guys I've known for years and years. Okay, so she's talking about sort of probably the mainstream critics. That kind of once in a while we'll get like a insider information type thing. Okay, fair enough. So when I got the information from others about what the weather report was, there was this real concern from friends of mine or coworkers of mine that saddened me. I also was like, I know who these guys are. You don't have to tell me who's talking about it or how bad it is online. I know exactly who they are. I supported them on Patreon. So she's suggesting that some of these guys, I'm assuming bigger guys, like I'm assuming she's not talking about like Nerdrotic. She's talking about like maybe Campia or like people in that sort of sphere. I don't know though. There are some of them that I respect, and there are some of them that I think are absolutely snake oil salesmen, just opportunists. Then of course there are the fascists and the racists. So it runs a gamut. It isn't just one thing or the other. Snake oil salesmen, just opportunists. I also think the gripes of the show, that any gripes with the show are completely valid. Snake oil salesmen and opportunists, fascists and racists. Okay, Leslye. So you think any gripes are valid, but if you don't feel like they're valid, you throw the label of snake oil salesman, opportunist, fascists, and racists. They just can't stop. You can't bring up this tiny percent. See, this is the whole problem with this show, is the focus on the tiny group of people. Whether it's why they made the show, who it's for, and then, okay, that's our focus. Didn't really work well at all because the majority of people were like, what the? And then the aftermath, and even during the show when it would come out, like Amanda Stenberg and all these people focusing on the tiny group over here that said some nasty comments. Instead of looking at the majority, they're just focused entirely on the small groups, like, which is such a silly thing to do. Because those people are always going to be there. You're never getting rid of the one racist dude out of 100. Like, just ignore him. Like, it's so stupid to me. But I think they focus on that because it takes, in their mind, they're redirecting the screw-ups. Oh, well, some of it wasn't real criticism. It was these evil people. Okay, well, but your show sucked, and most people thought it sucked. So, yeah, okay, great, those people too, but you're ignoring this huge thing over here, this elephant in the room, and looking at the mouse coming through the hole. Like, they're either delusional or this is just her deflecting, right? Because she's embarrassed, quite frankly, I would think. It's one or the other. Headland continued, so in some ways I wasn't surprised, and then in other ways I was disappointed. I think you always do that when you create something. It's just that Star Wars is on a massive level of visibility. I wasn't surprised, but I was disappointed. That sounds to me like somebody who knew that some of the stuff she was doing in the show was going to be received negatively. And she did it anyway. Like she said earlier in the interview, she took the risk anyway. She, of course, blames the timeline aspect of it. That's part of why I couldn't do as good a job. But she knows there were things that were going to tick people off and just did them anyway, which is fine. This is the way it goes, right? Like, in a surprising remark, Headland said the reaction to the Acolyte taught her not that fans are toxic, but something else entirely. Well, she just called them fascists and racist, so I don't really know how this jives. She's kind of, again, they're kind of all over the place. They don't really have a set mindset, so they're flying by the seat of their pants in these interviews, many of these people in Hollywood. And so there's an inauthenticity to it, because even in one interview, they're kind of going from one side to another, and they don't seem to have a overall perspective that they're just giving the interviewer. It's like jumping around based on the question. It made me start to think, rather than these fans are toxic or this thing is being mean to me, it made me think more that the content being made about Star Wars will ultimately be more culturally impactful than actual Star Wars. So she's saying like the YouTubers and people that talk about it will ultimately be more culturally impactful than actual Star Wars. Well, that's just pure poppycock right there. The critics hated George Lucas's movies for the most part, and it didn't matter. So that's not actually true. The only reason that the YouTubers and stuff get clicks and views that are criticizing it is because criticizing it has, when you do something really, really awful like this show was, criticizing it becomes almost like therapeutic. Like you go on, like I have guys that'll tell me, "Oh, I will much rather watch your review than watch the show for whatever it is," right? Because they're so jaded now with how terrible Disney Star Wars is that they're like, this is more fun. It's more fun to make fun of it. It's almost like a coping mechanism, right? Because we see the writing on the wall. Disney's, they're not selling. They keep piling on to their terrible stories and lore, and there's nowhere to go for them anymore. So what do? You don't watch the shows anymore. You listen to critics that watch the shows, make fun of it, and you laugh at it. It's like anything in life. When something happens that you can't control, but is really, really important to you, you know, you might get sad for a while, but at some point you gotta just be like, this is just so stupid, I can't even believe it. And you just make fun of it. That's the case here. So she's not correct at all. If the project had been done well, and I thought, you know, where, actually, speaking of the timeline, I thought where she chose to do this show, or Disney chose to do the show in the timeline, actually gave her some leeway, in the sense that it's so far from the sequels, and it could have a connection to the prequels, so you've actually set yourself up to where people might kind of, if you'd done a good job, people might kind of forget about what went on with the sequels and kind of forget about some of those other shows, because it's such a different place. But you did a bad job. You broke lore. You made the Jedis look awful. You did a whole bunch of stuff that just doesn't jive with Star Wars and how the Jedi are. And then, of course, the nonsensical stuff within each episode, and it was very silly. It just wasn't a good show, but it actually, like I said, I think it had the opportunity, being that it was separate from all that other stuff. So it's like you're not going to impact Luke, you're not going to impact Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're not going to impact all these guys. The only character really that you can even maybe use would be Yoda, because he would have been alive. I don't know why Ki-Adi-Mundi was alive. I'm not super hung up about the fact that he's as old as he is. Whatever. It's just stupid. It's just another stupid thing. Why even bother doing that? Like, she could have had all new characters, and then maybe you have a little cameo with Yoda, right? Which would make sense. You do a scene on Coruscant or something like that. But no, it's a bad show, and so people were mad, and it would have had a cultural impact on its own if it had been good. But it was not good, therefore it's the cultural impact of your show is more based on people like me making fun of it. The show was canceled just weeks after the finale aired. Leslye Headland said she was not surprised by it. And why would you not be? I think I was surprised at the swiftness of it and the publicness of it. I was surprised by how it was handled, but once I was getting particular phone calls about the reaction and the criticism and the viewership, I felt like, okay, the writing's on the wall for sure. Okay, well, I mean, yeah, that's pretty much the way it is. The reason they did it so publicly and so quickly is I think they just said, that's it. Like, we have to just nip this in the bud, try and make fans forget about it as quickly as humanly possible so we can move on with something else, because this is just a really divisive Really divisive. Let me know in the comment section what you think. I wouldn't say it's as divisive as The Last Jedi, but man, it's pretty divisive, especially for prequel people and lore and all that other stuff. It's very, very divisive. Let me know in the comment section what you think. Do you think it's as divisive as The Last Jedi? I would say probably not, but man, it's right up there. Headland stated that the understanding of the show's viewership was a little muddled for her. With Star Wars, you're not just measured within the marketplace that you happen to be in at the time. You're measured against every other Star Wars show. Well, it didn't do well for that either. I'm pretty sure only one episode made it into the top 10 of Nielsen's, of all shows. So even by the metric of, and actually even by the metric of Star Wars, there's a bunch of shows that are pretty crappy. But no, you're being compared to everything on streaming services, and you did really, really badly. Really, really badly. With Darth Plagueis making a cameo in the final and May and Kamir teaming up, the Acolyte certainly left off on a cliffhanger. Boy, cliffhanger, that's a pretty strong word. Jeez. Then she's talking about Season 2. My showrunner and I had a lot of ideas going into Season 1, so we definitely were thinking about that, specifically with Manny Jacinto's character. We always knew that Lee Jung-jae was going to be the emotional anchor of the first season, watching the deterioration of that father figure, so we had already thought ahead and thought about what type of relationship we wanted to look at in the second season. We talked about all of that from a thematic and character standpoint, but in terms of actual narrative, there were only a couple signposts that we knew we wanted to hit. Well, Soul, Ji Jung-jae's Soul, it's again, because the show has so much an allegorical connection to her personal life. It's like the dad she wanted. The dad that admits he's a piece of crap, even though he did nothing wrong. That's what it feels like to me, honestly. That's what it feels like to me. I'm not going to get too into that. Like, you can do your own research about Leslye Headland and her sister and her parents and her upbringing and how they feel about her lifestyle and all those things. But that's what it felt like to me after I watched it and thinking about that. It's like, this is just like what you wanted your dad to do. You wanted him to just like cave in a really weird way, even though he shouldn't have had to. That's what it felt like to me. That's just what I'm saying. She has no regrets about the shows. And that's... Swallow your pride, man. Of course you have regrets. It failed. You wanted to do more seasons and you couldn't because it sucked. Of course. I would have regrets. Of course you do. Don't lie. Like... That's the thing. I hate how these people lie to the fans, man. We know you have regrets. Of course you do. As if you wanted to do one failed season of your show. I'm absolutely obsessed with Star Wars. I still am, and I love my show, and I know that it was one. See, just suck it up, dude. It wasn't wonderful. It wasn't wonderful. It was terrible. All these people, they just never admit it. If it was wonderful, then that means all the people that hated it are just they just don't get it. They just don't get it. It's like Rian Johnson, same thing. It's like, just admit that your movie sucked, dude. Like, we all know it sucked. You know it sucked. You just don't want to just suck it up and admit that it sucked. Just admit it. It's not hard. Anyways, guys, that's it. So she's come out now, and basically, it's funny because Disney, wanted to move on so quickly, and we're still doing these interviews, trying to figure it out. But I think the highlight of this interview is really the beginning of it. Like, I forget about the stupid racist, fascist bullcrap. Of course, that's a highlight because it's like they're still making those excuses from this tiny minority of people that have nothing to do with anything. It's when she at the beginning, in a veiled way, blames where she had to take the timeline and how Tony had. He brilliantly exploited it in such a genius way, but he was able to use stormtroopers and iconography in the war, and he had a much better place in the timeline. That stands out to me. Like I said, she had a great part in the timeline to use in a lot of ways, but she just screwed it up. She just screwed it up. She didn't know what she was doing. You're telling your family dynamic story and then mixing in weirdness, and like a lot of people were ticked off about the witch ladies making people out of the Force. There were a lot of people that thought that was just totally anti to like Anakin and the Chosen One, and how can they do this? This is disgusting. Which I see that for me it's just so stupid, and I still felt like, well, they made them out of the Force, whereas Anakin was a manifestation. So for me, it was always a little bit different. But it's just, how could you possibly think, like, okay, I love Star Wars. I've always loved Star Wars. I know all these critics. I'm friends with all these guys. If you love Star Wars, you would think you would know fans of Star Wars. And if you knew fans of Star Wars, you would have known that the decisions you were making in the show would have pissed people off. So it's like, it makes me think like, either you didn't care and you were going to piss people off for the message or whatever you were going to do, regardless, and deliberately, or you literally don't talk to Star Wars fans. You're a fan yourself, but you're like you don't talk to them. And you're one of those fans over on the side here that doesn't mind lore-breaking stuff and making Jedi look terrible. So everything with Leslye Headland is extremely convoluted. It always has been. And this interview is just another example. It's a lot of excuse making. Wouldn't it be refreshing if anybody from Disney would stand up and say, you know what, we screwed up? Wouldn't that just be so refreshing? It wouldn't change anyone's feelings on the Acolyte, but wouldn't it be refreshing if she had done that? It'd be like, you know what? At least she figured it out. Doesn't fix anything, doesn't make my life any better, but at least I have more respect for this person. But it's always excuse making. Anyways, guys, let me know in the comment section what you think. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. It always helps the channel. Feel free to check anything else on my channel. Have yourselves a very good day.